Now adjourn.
For Vancouver East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to rise in the House to discuss recognizing and declaring December 13th each year Nanjing Massacre Commemorative Day. On November 30th, 2017, I made a statement in the House regarding the 80th anniversary of the Nanjing Massacre. I also asked if the government would proclaim December 13th as Nanjing Massacre Commemorative Day during question period. I received an encouraging answer from the Minister of Canadian Heritage as she offered to work with me to achieve this goal. I then followed up with the Minister, and she informed me that the issue falls in the jurisdiction of the Minister of Foreign Affairs. I then promptly wrote to the Minister of Foreign Affairs. As she was out of the country at the time, she asked that I work with her Chief of Staff. Subsequently, I was advised that, in fact, the matter should be dealt with in the Ministry of Canadian Heritage. I then went back to the Minister of Heritage, at which point she advised that it would not be possible to have the declaration made by December 13th, 2017. While it's unfortunate that this did not happen on its 80th anniversary, however, I hope that the Minister of Canadian Heritage is still open to declaring December 13th of each year as Nanjing Massacre Commemorative Day. This is an issue of recognizing a tragedy and the lasting impact that it had on many people, many of whom now call Canada their home. 80 years ago, it estimated that between 20 and 80,000 Chinese women and girls were raped, and approximately 300,000 people were killed. Over the course of World War II, an estimated 200,000 women and girls from China, Korea, Burma, Indonesia, and the Philippines and other occupied territories in Asia were tricked, kidnapped, or coerced into working in brothels to serve as, quote, comfort women. It is worth noting that on November 2007, members of this House unanimously passed a motion moved by the former NDP MP Olivia Chow recognizing this act as sexual slavery, expressing regret at attempts by some members of the Japanese government to ignore or diminish the events that occurred, to recognize the progress made by Japan and its major contributions towards international peace, to affirm that Canada-Japanese alliance, and for the Government of Canada to encourage the Government of Japan to abandon any statement devaluing the expression of regret from the Kono Statement of 1993. In 2001, the NDP BC government worked in collaboration with BC Alpha and developed a resource guide and educational materials to ensure that this past is not forgotten. This guide has now led other provinces to adapt the material for their use, and I also want to acknowledge that in October of 2017, members of Ontario's legislature passed MPP So Wong's motion to recognize December 13th as Nanjing Massacre Commemorative Day unanimously. In that process, she also received over 100,000 signatures in support of this declaration. In commemorating this atrocity, communities across Canada hosted events to mark this day. I had the opportunity to attend the ceremonial tribute and exhibition of historical materials and cultural relics, along with photos of some of the Nanjing Massacre survivors at the Greater Toronto Chinese Cultural Centre. The event was hosted by 80 organizations under the umbrella of the Nanjing Fellow Association of Canada. I also attended a film screening at the Richmond Public Library hosted by BC Alpha. Mr. Speaker, there's no question that this is a nonpartisan issue. It is an important day to mark, and I ask all members of the House to work with me to achieve this goal.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Canadian Heritage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'd like to start by thanking my colleague, the member for Vancouver East, for her intervention and her efforts regarding raising awareness of the tragic atrocities that took place in Nanjing during the Second World War. Canada
recognizes the compassionate gesture and encourages all countries to go forward positively and constructively. China and Japan are two important partners for Canada in the Asia-Pacific region. We are committed to increasing our links with these regions, including on the cultural level, to ensure the prosperity of Canadians, but also their security in those regions.
Outlined by the member for Vancouver East. The majority of the victims being Chinese civilians. We fully recognize this. Women and girls suffered in particular as they are often the most victimized group in these types of violent conflicts. It is well known that one of our government's core priorities is its commitment to gender equality and women's rights, Mr. Speaker. At the international level, we are a leader in this regard through our championing of the promotion and protection of human rights, as well as women's and children's rights, in a wide range of multilateral fora, including as a focus of Canada's presidency of the G7 this year, which will be taking place in Charlevoix. As with other atrocities in history, the Nanjing Massacre was predicated upon the systematic dehumanization of Chinese people as non-human, as other. It's important that discourse at every level does not marginalize populations or portray them in demeaning or dehumanizing terms. Muslims as terrorists, LGBTQ2 community members as sexually deviant or morally reprehensible. The Premier Ministre s'est exprimé publiquement à plus.
The Prime Minister has publicly stated on several occasions that fighting intolerance and hate in all of its form is important. All political leaders and communities need to support each other in the face of this challenge, and Canadians must work together to promote mutual understanding and overcome hatred. Furthermore, protection of human rights is a fundamental aspect of our vision for Canada and for the world. This is a component of the mandate letter for the Minister of Canadian Heritage and has a link with the mandate letter for the Minister for Global Affairs. Through our efforts, we support diversity, inclusiveness, Pacific pluralism, and efforts to reconcile different countries on matters such as those raised this afternoon.
Welcoming communities, actions such as speaking out when we encounter racism in our communities, volunteering with one of the many organizations that support inclusion, and reporting any hate crimes that are encountered can go a long way towards ensuring that all Canadians can grow together in peace and prosperity. The Government
of Canada recognizes the events and measures taken to highlight this sad event, including those passed by the Legislature of Ontario, but will not take a position regarding commemorative days designated by provincial legislative assemblies or other levels of government. However, the Government of Canada expresses its sympathy to the victims of suffering and those who have lost their lives during armed conflicts. Thank you.
For Vancouver East.
This is about the formal recognition of atrocities, learning from history, and paying tribute to those impacted. This is not only to commemorate the victims and survivors, but in the aim of preventing such atrocities from happening again. The Nanjing Massacre is often referred to as the forgotten Holocaust. It is incumbent on us to ensure that atrocities of this magnitude are not forgotten. It is my hope that the government will work with me to ensure that history is not ignored, that the Nanjing Massacre is not forgotten, is not a forgotten Holocaust, and that for the Canadian government to recognize December 13th and each subsequent December 13th moving forward as Nanjing Massacre Commemorative Day. I'm open to work with whichever minister the government deems appropriate to engage in whatever process the government feels could most effectively and efficiently have every December 13th declared as Nanjing Massacre Commemorative Day.
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of National Heritage.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our government is committed to promoting peace, constructive dialogue, as well as safety. At an international level, we work and will continue to work with our national and international partners. This government recognizes the suffering that all armed conflicts inflict on populations around the world, namely civilians, women, and girls. The occupation of Nanjing is not an exception to that.
Our work as ardent defenders of human rights, gender rights, and encourage positive dialogue between nations to ensure a more peaceful and prosperous world. Thank you, Monsieur le Président.